There are new concerns today about Japan's damaged nuclear plant. The temperature's rising in one of those reactors, and radiation levels now are way up at another one. Our CNN's Martin Savage, he joins us from Tokyo. It's past midnight there. Marty, what is the biggest worry right now at this plant? Help us understand what is actually happening today.
Well, it's almost one of those where you want to take your pick, but let me bring you the very latest news, and this is perhaps now top of the list of concerns. It's just been confirmed to CNN from TEPCO, those are the operators of the Fukushima facility out there, that plutonium has now been found in the soil on the premises of the nuclear facility. Plutonium could only come from one source, and that would be reactor number 3, because that's the only one that had this MOX, or mixed oxide fuel, and that was a mixture of plutonium and uranium. That's why reactor number 3 had always been the most serious of concerns, because that is the most dangerous of fuels. The fact that there is plutonium found in the soil, and I'm not going to profess to be a nuclear expert, but from all the discussion that has been had on the subject, would indicate that this was the clearest example of a possible breach of the containment vessel for reactor number 3. Again, TEPCO confirming to us that they have found traces of plutonium in the soil at the Fukushima nuclear site, and that would appear that it had come from reactor number 3.
Marty,
this is on top of the other news of the day, which had been...
I'm sorry, Marty, I know you're no expert in this, but does that mean that we are closer to a nuclear meltdown when they talk about a meltdown?
Well, meltdown is one of those terms that can be used a little too loosely here. I mean, what you are concerned about, of course, is at any time in a core of a nuclear reactor, the water level drops to a point where the fuel rods are exposed. That's all right as long as there is no breach of the containment vessel. But when you start picking up traces of plutonium outside in the soil, it would indicate there has been some sort of broaching of that vessel. And again, that is about the worst stuff you want to get out there because of the high toxicity of that radioactively. So clearly, it appears that reactor number 3, for all the concerns, is now jumping again to the list of concerns. We thought reactor number 2, because of high levels of radiation found in water there, especially in the turbine building, they wanted to pump that water out so they could do more work to get the pumps going. The problem is, Suzanne, they've run out of places to store the water. This is another problem they have. They thought they had tanks where they could pump off this excess. Those tanks are all full. They can't get in and work if there's water down in these areas. It's just one thing snowballing into another, Suzanne.
It sounds like it's getting much worse. And I understand that there's now radiation that was found in the ocean about, what, 360 yards from shore? Do we know if it's from the plant, runoff from the water that's been pumped in? How dangerous is that? Right.
Clearly, it's coming from the reactor site. The question is exactly where is it coming from and how is it migrating into the ocean? Some speculation is that the water has now been found in these electrical tunnels. These are very large tunnels. You could crawl through them that run all around the facility. The fact that water has gotten in there that is highly radioactive could imply that that is the way it is somehow traveling into the ocean itself. TEPCO says they really don't know where it's coming from. That's what's so worrisome. They do say it's not a threat to humans, and they also say they don't believe it's a severe threat to sea life because of the half-life it's gone in about 8 days. But still, you have to wonder, where is it coming from and how is it getting into the ocean? And until you know that, you can't stop it. Suzanne?
Marty Savage, thank you very much. Obviously giving us the latest update there out of Japan. I want to bring in our Michael Freelander. He's been helping us make sense of the nuclear crisis. He joins us from Hong Kong. Michael, you spent 25 years, right, in the nuclear industry, 13 of them as a senior plant operator. First of all, just if you could react to what Marty just reported here. He said now they're finding plutonium in the soil around reactor. They believe it's coming from reactor 3. What does that mean?
Well, the fact that they found plutonium out there is obviously something that we need to follow very closely. I wouldn't necessarily jump to that as a final conclusion right away, because over the last 72 hours, we've seen them make some very, very far implicating statements, only then to 24 hours later retract them. This is obviously a very, very important, very important development. And if, in fact, it can be confirmed, obviously it's something that we need to look into further.
Michael, if it is true, though, what does that mean?
Well, one of the things that's been a bit contorted, all low enriched uranium-fueled reactors have plutonium in them. It's part of the nuclear fuel cycle as the reactor operates. How it got out into the soil obviously is the operative question right now. Now, we know that over the course of the last 2 weeks, the reactor operators have been venting steam out of the containment buildings, and that steam has come from the reactor itself. We also have some indication in the Unit 2 reactor that there may have been some degree of fuel overheating, potentially some form of fuel melting. So again, whether or not that plutonium may have come from the spent fuel pool in Unit 3 or perhaps in some of the other reactors, or as a result of the containment venting that has been going on over the days, it's really difficult to tell. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter where it's coming from. If it's in fact a confirmed situation, it's something that needs to be taken care of quite promptly.
Talk about the radioactive water that we're seeing. What are the options if those storage tanks are full? Where do you put that?
Well, you know, from other issues that have occurred at nuclear power plants around the world, there's a number of ways of handling this. It's not uncommon at all to bring in temporary storage tanks that you can pump the water into. The issue here is that just the very, very high levels of radioactive contamination. The point is that normally in a facility like this, tanks that can hold this kind of water are well shielded, they're well protected. We make sure that if in the event that there's another seismic event, that the tank doesn't rupture, obviously, and drain the contents someplace that we don't want. That's probably the biggest concern, because as we've seen over the last couple of weeks, there have been ongoing aftershocks from the original earthquake. So this is something, obviously, that the engineers are going to have to take a lot of consideration to when they decide where they're going to put that water.
Okay. Michael Freelander, obviously a lot of questions, still a lot of unanswered questions coming out from that nuclear plant. Thank you, Michael.